Yo, hey, what's up, viewer? Welcome back to the NEBULOUS Live Development Creation Series. This is day 15, hour 2, and I am continuing work to spawn random patterns for star systems within Nebula. Alright, so in the last video, I was working on a script, but I didn't manage to finish it all the way, so I wasn't actually able to show anything that worked properly. The idea was to add these float values so the start spawn plus the increment times x, but then there's one more thing we have to add to it. And we have to add, let's see what this is. Nothing actually got anywhere with that. We simply have to add a percentage of x increment to this. And that may wind up being a player data value, in fact. So for now we've got resolutions, we've got starting vector plus the incremented, but we also have to add one more value, which is the internal value of the actual box that we are creating, which is some percentage of the x increment. So some percentage gets picked. I've got to add something in player data. So ideally what I'm adding here is let's see, is it a float? Because it's a percentage, so public float. And is it another minimum? So x, minimum x. It's minimum x buffer. And it would conversely do the same thing on the other side, maximum x buffer. However, this isn't very determinized from Nebula, so minimum Nebula spawn x buffer, maximum Nebula spawn x buffer, which we could probably get away with just using a Nebula spawn x buffer. And we could just essentially guard both sides using that. Or we can just make it uniform, essentially. Cross. Let's see what I can just do is Nebula spawn y buffer. Nebula spawn z buffer. We come over here and we more or less have to simply say plus x increment times player data dot Nebula spawn x buffer. And then we have to just do the same thing for these. And I'm actually not even sure if this is correct, because we actually need a random buffer value. So we want the x increment to be multiplied by a percentage that is in fact a random range from let's see, x increment times a percentage. And that percentage is from nebula spawn x buffer to close to the same thing, nebula spawn x buffer, but it has to subtract it from 1, I think is what I need to do. And this essentially just buffers the range to make sure that it's like a certain percentage away from the edge. And more or less we have to do the same thing on these values. And it's multiplied by random range because we're adding the whole value of an increment, but some percentage of that, not just the flat float random percentage. Make sure these are set properly. And then we're looking at more or less the new XYZs of the new position, starting position. No, I actually added it all together, so I don't need to call it that anymore. New starting position, basically. Or new random position. And I might need to simply make that a variable as well. However, what we've got is the position, but do we want to do the initialization here as well? And let's see, nebula stars. I basically could do the instantiation here because instantiate, and it's almost like we're just running this basically again, if I'm not mistaken, practically. And generate new star position is just random, new random position. And nebula stars was not initialized. Is that what it's suggesting, or? Just cleaning all this up here. So it's confused about this for some reason. Because it has to be a, it's this basically. My bad. It's getting a little confused there. Okay, so that's going to instantiate, and now we will have the game object stored here. And I'm just going to make it public for now because maybe a neighboring system needs like to look at its stars or something, or maybe use their positions for some kind of like calculation or whatever, so it might need to be public. It'll also let us look at how well they actually spawned. So let me just make sure starting spawn vector. Okay, and I'm pretty sure I need to like pull these out of here. If I just like that, okay. Might as well for how long this algorithm is. Same thing here. Just going to yank this part and place it here. This is one heck of a starting algorithm. And that'll help with some caching issues. Alright, so now I just have to set the values in the player data for nebula spawning, which is all these things basically. And I'm also going to, oops, let me unlock it. Let's see, galaxy, intergalactic arms. I'm trying to decide on I'm sure it's getting that. Because I think it's arm spline that actually generates the nebula. And I'm just going to do one nebula for now. And okay, so then I guess it's just let me see what's on the player data. Star prefabs, we have them all. Minimum nebula star count 2. Maximum nebula star count 4. Minimum nebula star density, maximum nebula star density. So like 0.15. Oh, it's actually not letting me use a floating point value there. Let me double check that. Where am I using nebula star density? It says it's floating point. Into min, into max. My bad. So I think I just messed that up. It might need to be a float instead. And then random nebula star density. Yeah. So these two just need to be floats, basically. I'll just say 15 and 0.85. And then resolution wise, it can only be 4 stars max anyways, 4 or 2, it's like 2, 4. And then same thing, let's do 2 and 4 for these. And then nebula SpawnX buffer. Once again, 0.15. Oh wait, actually 0.075 should be good because that's 15% total across, if by splitting it in half at each side. Oops, and that's just supposed to be 0. Right, so if this works, I should have a prefab collection of random objects under the nebula. But I might have forgot to use the component or something. So it's galaxy, arm spline, nebula, and I do not have the instantiations yet. So let's see here. Was it under spawn nebula? Is that what I? Nebula stars. So I feel like this. I did forget. But then it says nebula stars. Oh, so these are the stars of this nebula. So there'll be one nebula, and it should. So I screwed up something, but it's in the right direction, I suppose. 3 red supergiants and a red star. For some reason the camera is way off or something. Like the disk is 1,000, 10,000 and the red supergiant's only 300. So I'm confused as to how a oh, it's almost acting like the disk is emitting a ton of light. Yeah, I don't know, it's strange. The nebula, they just are like, for some reason they're gigantic. The nebula is 3,000 across. This is 300. So we should fit in there. So maybe the emission is too bright or something. Change the intensity to like 2 and then save it. Then I'm going to come to the player data and I'm actually going to scrap all of the other values just so I can test if this is part of the problem or not. And maybe it's just emitting way too hard. Okay, so then in this instance we have a nebula with 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and it has 9 supergiants. So now if I select this nebula and zoom in and go inside of it, oh, they actually deactivated. My bad. What if I activate them? Just okay, so that's like definitely strange. It's not letting me focus in on this. It's not like, oh, it is way too large. Yeah, I don't understand why this is screwing up so hard. More or less, it's just like, it's just spawning way too big, basically. And I'm not sure why. It is supposed to scale up, but what it is not supposed to do is get way too big like that. So for some reason I'm like overscaling it. I'm trying to think about why that is. Like, I never changed the scale itself. Or else would I actually be initializing data like that? I'm sorry, somewhere I feel like I must have asked it to change the scale of something like this. It's close, but that's the arm spline, not the other thing I'm thinking of. Current spawn local scale changes. Yeah, it shouldn't matter. The spline shouldn't be affecting that too much. Yeah, honestly, I'm not exactly sure why this is acting like this. Because it looks like the sun is like outside of the nebula. And that's just not correct. Or it's now it just looks like it's rendering like that. Yeah, so I'm not sure here. The yeah, no, this is way off for some reason. So hey, I completely screwed up something in the prefabs. Like a nebula. It says a nebula is only 1.5 by some odd. However, when I come in here and grab a nebula, it's 3000 by 5000 by 3000. But for some reason, the sun is getting like super scaled, and I don't know why that is. See, that's how it's supposed to happen. And then a nebula is supposed to just be able to plot it on top of it, more or less, like this. Oh, it's not actually giving me the, oops. It's not actually giving me the nebula. So it's like scaling to its parent, basically. Okay, so didn't exactly know that. But I have an idea then if that's where it's occurring. I can more or less on this transform do something a little different. I have to say transform active nebula transform. Find object of type. And I have an active nebula component for tagging it. And then down here I'm just going to say active nebula transform. Because, oh, but that's not correct. I guess it'll work if I put active nebula transform to equal transform.position. And then, yeah, active nebula transforms the parent. Wait, so is that required, or? Oh, hold on. I don't need to jack around with its position. I can just set it up as a parent. And this should fix the suns from getting way too large. I need to make sure the active nebula object is, oh, it does have the active nebula script on it. We don't have to do start prefabs, but we do have, I could say current nebula stars or something. Otherwise, active nebula is correct. So this is a true, I think. Let me just double check. Include an active true. And that will fix that part. Alright, so now the active nebula has all of the red supergiants, which is once again 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like maximized again, basically. which I don't know if that's accurate or not. So let's select this and zoom in and see what happens. Yes, that's not correct, but... So once again, the active nebula is this. It's 3,000 by 3,000. Which means there should be able to technically fit 10 of these in here. So if I go here and say go to main camera, where is the main camera at relative to this nebula? The camera is like dead center. Ah, crud. Just turned it all off, so I'm going to turn it all back on. And the idea is that it zooms into like right here and then looks at the stars in here, which that's a little closer. So I think it's just that the camera is like a dead center, but I definitely got way too much size on the prefabs. But I can zoom down into multiple decimal places. So it's in the right direction, but I think it's just because they're too large that they don't fit properly. Otherwise, it did generate stars in basically random spots, but they're definitely like too tall. The height is way off. They shouldn't be going that high anyway. To be honest, the code should be like so I'm using the nebula stars local scale, which is that. I mean, it can only go up so many times before it's outside of the box. So like if it's 500 tall, and these are 300, then it's feasible that these are and even has it out of the bottom a little bit, which is part of what the buffer value was for. I think they're gonna have to be smaller either way. So I'm actually going to do something. I've got to grab all of the star types and change their scales, basically. So let me see if I can multi-select these. And scale times equals 0.1. Can I do that? I don't know if that might have screwed them all up pretty good. Okay, it's not gonna work. So instead I need to dang. Okay, so what I really need to do is use a custom inspector. I know I had some kind of editor tool. I think I just say editor, I can't remember though. Editor. custom editor type of, and I'm going to have to create a type. So I'm just going to wrap it up in this file, since it's just a quick thing anyway. So public class and it's just going to go on a random object anyway. And then, honestly, now I'm just forgetting exactly how to do this. I know I need to do like an on inspector GUI, I think. That's what I need to do. Let me check real quick. I had a script I was using for this. Maybe it was this one. Yeah, override on inspector GUI. Okay. And we're still going to use draw default inspector. It doesn't really matter though, this is only doing like one thing anyway. So it's if GUI.button, basically. Or GUI layout.button. Basically, we are going to say all celestial prefabs how do I do this? Target dot celestial prefabs. Once again, I forgot a little bit how to do this. Let me see here. Target. Okay, yeah, so you have to initialize the component. So you say celestial scales builder equals. You have to cast target to a celestial scales builder. And then from here we can say builder dot run. And from that we can pick a scaling value and say for celestial prefabs dot length celestial prefabs. This is actually a prefab, so I don't know how this is going to work. Prefabs that I had to transform that local scale times equals scaling value. So now I'm just going to make a random object. Whatever. And we have to attach the new editor script to this. Oh, so I need a celestial scales builder component. But it's not actually noticing it as a file type. So I have to actually come in here and go like this. copy it, and okay, so it might have a confliction for a moment, but like this basically. Like this, and it doesn't actually need an editor file. Oh, and I have to come over here and yank this one so it'll compile properly. Well, okay, so I was hoping it would let me just write the file together, but it did not, so let's do this instead. Okay, so now I should be able to, in fact, toss the editor, or I have to just toss the component on there. This one's not an editor script. Okay, so this is kind of weird. Mono behavior. I should be able to put this on here. Something in there that's particularly... Oh, I guess the reason is because it's in the editor folder. Okay, so I have to gather all the celestial prefabs. So we're looking at crud, you know what? I screwed this up last time too, I forgot to lock it first. Sure, grab all the prefabs and then drop them all into the celestial prefabs option. And I don't think it matters if they're in order, actually. They just all need to scale uniformly. So then after star, it's planet. Throw all the planets in there. And throw these signatures in there as well. And from here we are simply going to see if I can change all of them to be 10 times smaller. And now if I click on red supergiant, it should be... Okay, so it actually did not change it. Maybe it's because I had it locked. I don't know if that's true or not. 15.6. Wait, hold on. It did go down. Okay, so it's just had to refresh, but they all went down now, so that worked as intended. Let's save me from having to do all of that manually. I almost didn't, but I figured might as well. I know how to. Okay, so now the sizes aren't ridiculous. Nebula clones 3000 by 500, and these things are only 36s. So once again, if we... Oh, but it's not active. I turned it on. So now they're still way out of position. But their sizes are more feasible. If I can just... fix the Y resolution's messed up for some reason. It's like, it's just for some reason the Y resolution's way off. But let's see if I select one of these and move in on it. This is basically how it's supposed to work. Except for one thing. that I'm going to change real quick is under my Nebula shader, I'm going to change something since I'm inside the nebula now. What I need to do is go to the graph inspector and change the surface options to transparent, and also change the option for multiple face, rendering multiple faces, which I'm not actually seeing here. Back in the front rendering, is that the same thing? I think that's probably it. So I'm going to turn that on, and then essentially when I go inside of it, I should still be able to quote-unquote see the nebula, as if I'm inside of it. And it's also transparent, so because it's transparent, the shader can set up a transparency value. Sorry about that, it seems to be having a Yale time compiling this. If it's transparent, it can't... I guess it has to be forward if it's transparent. Okay, so now that that's done, let's see here. We are going to have an alpha value of like 0.85, basically. And it's two-sided, so let's see how this looks. Sorry about the compile time. It does not like doing the forward compiling the forward shader. That's true. Okay. So now we can start this up and see how this looks in play mode. It should be like a slightly foggier looking texture on the nebula, and then when you zoom in, dang it, it didn't work. Oh, it looks like it kind of did. I can't see the... It's a little strange. It's like, it's pretty close to working. It's... See, if I go in on it here, it like... So that's not exactly correct. I really wanted the Nebula shader to... Oh, it turned off. Oh, double-sided mode. Sorry, I don't know how I missed that. That's what I was looking for, basically. So let's try this one more time. The idea is just that the nebula will be... You'll be able to basically see the same color of the nebula on the inside. Oh, but you know what? The nebula might be... Man, it does not like rendering that. The nebula might just be like turning itself off. I need to double check that that's not happening. Alright, so if I zoom in on this, and we go, the galaxy turns off, let's turn the galaxy back on. And there, we basically have the nebula on. So like, that can like change a little bit. But more or less the player has like stars inside of the nebula, and there's stars on the outside of the nebula, but so the idea is the player can then select other stars. We have to fix the size. And then I guess at any point, if you want to, you can actually zoom out of the nebula again. The only problem is that the stars are not all inside the nebula properly. And then the zoom positions probably needs to be better. So the camera should probably be like over here somewhere or something. Either that, or the camera needs to be like up like right here with like a really wide field of view or something. Either that, or it needs to be like inside like this. And then maybe there's a field of view thing. Maybe the nebula needs to be taller, I'm not sure. So it needs a little bit of work in that regard. So I guess what's messing up is that there's a couple things actually. One thing is that I'm deactivating the galaxy object. So I need to change that here. But here I actually do not want to set this to false. And then I also want to fix the spawning, which is part of the or no, sorry, not spawn nebula. It's the spawn nebula stars or something. This one. So I'm screwing up something where the Y value is going up way too quickly, basically. Let me make sure I throw a value in here. So Y resolution, what if I just force it to be 1? Okay, it's not like it didn't even build any. So let me change it to 1, 2. For I think it's exclusive if it's an integer. So let me like this. Or wait a minute. Wait. Oh, I did the wrong ones. 2, 4 here, but then 1, 2 here. My bad. So I just put them in the wrong spot. So now we zoom in. There's one supergiant in here. And is it actually inside of the nebula somewhere? Oh, I guess it is inside of there. So here's the nebula, and the supergiant is technically, in fact, inside of it. Kind of a weird spot, but it is technically in a random position inside the nebula. A lonely star. Okay, so now I have to figure out, like, a good spot to put the camera, basically, because the camera has to, I guess the camera doesn't have to do this quite yet, but at some point it's going to have to, like, really expand its field of view, I feel like, over the top of this. It's kind of what I'm imagining. So let me change the, and actually I'm getting the itch to use Cinemachine on this one because now that I kind of have an idea of how to do the transition cameras, more or less I can set up some virtual cameras and then it will do the transition. And all I have to do is activate them. Either that, or I just have to move the camera into the nebula. Which, alright, or move the camera like right over the nebula and then spread out the field of view. But I also have to point the camera down also. So I have to pick like an angle. And then squeak the field of view value. And that should effectively set the camera up without having to use Cinemachine. But if I use Cinemachine, I would have to supply a manual position. And then once I do that, I would have to reference the cameras, and then I would have to set separate cameras to live or whatever. And I kind of just feel like using the camera movement. So what I can do is assume that there is a okay, so the idea is more or less to expand the field of view around the nebula. And within the nebula, then you can see where the different stars are. So there might be a way to zoom field of view within through player command actually. And that could actually expand or decrease its field of view. And that would allow them to select a system. And then the player would then move. Oh, but then I'm trying to avoid that actually. I'm trying to avoid moving into. I'm trying to avoid zooming in until there's a transition. And once there's a transition, then like move the camera, not exactly change field of view, or maybe change field of view a little bit depending on the perspective. It would depend. All right, so I suppose this is what is this? A main camera? Well, actually, what happens is basically in here. So more or less what has to happen is this lerp actually has to lerp a rotation value as well, is the idea. So camera.main.transform position, or excuse me, local, I guess that local rotation equals, oh, and that's just a quaternion. Alright, well, in the next video I'm going to set up this local rotation to update using, it looks like a quaternion of some kind. And that is going to start to rotate the camera straight down up to a value, which I need to put somewhere. And that value will essentially angle the camera a little bit, but then orient the camera like just inside of the nebula, maybe close to the center, but pointed mostly down, and that way it will actually, and maybe increase the field of view. Just to see, you know, we might have to lerp the field of view here also, but the idea is to basically have the camera looking down into the galaxy, maybe angled a little bit, or into the nebula, maybe angled a little bit, with the ability to pan the camera, maybe to see multiple stars. And I think that's how I'm going to go with that for now. It'll be a little trickier when there's volumes. Like if the nebula is like a more amorphous volume, like a bean shape or something, it would be harder to stick the camera in one spot and not be blocked in certain ways, but maybe there's something else to that. So, alright, so thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.